take this course. Langdon has been a best-selling author, world-renowned innovation consultant, award-winning innovator, and basically he has led the UNICEF polio eradication effort, which was honored also with the Innovation Leader Impact Award for 2018. Is co-author of 10 books on innovation strategy, which are translated in different languages. He has been actually a very, I would say, a significant contributor in the International Association of Innovation Professionals. And this is how we got to know together with Langdon. So Langdon, if you can spotlight Langdon in this moment. I'd like to know a little bit before giving the floor to you and talking about, speaking about this topic. First of all, can you share a little bit more about what you have done so far, why design thinking is a topic which is dear to your heart, and why you have invested a lot on this field and innovation?
Yeah, so good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Very nice to see you all. Arila, thank you. Kevin, thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you today. So a little bit of background about myself in response to your question, Arila. I've been doing innovation work for about 35 years. And over the course of that time, the field of innovation has evolved enormously. It used to be a sort of a simple thing that a few people did, and now it's a big thing that lots of people are thinking about because we've all learned how important it can be both to the success of a company and to the success of a country. Design thinking as a tool or a framework, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, is one part of a complete innovation package or complete innovation program, but obviously a very significant part. And so my goal today is simply to present an overview of innovation and how it relates to design thinking, and hopefully give you a lot of examples that will enable you to see how it's been able to achieve pretty significant results for lots of organizations in the public and private sector. So with that, if it's all right, I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Sure.
All right. So just to confirm, you should be seeing a screen with a light bulb that says design thinking.
We do.
That's our topic. Great. So this is a portion of a longer online training course called Innovation Mastery that we have put here for the GIMI think tank. So what is design thinking? Design thinking is really about helping us to see differently. So at one level, it's very simple, and it also gets kind of involved, as we'll see as we go through. So we use this little figure as a way to think about what we know. And the stuff outside and the stuff inside are different. The stuff we all know is what's outside, and the stuff that no one knows is what's hidden inside. And design thinking is a method or a technique to try to access the stuff that no one knows. And those things are very much related to experience, to our experiences and to our feelings. And we use the phrase tacit knowledge or hidden knowledge. So when we do design thinking, we're looking for tacit or hidden knowledge, the stuff that no one knows yet that will enable us to be successful as innovators. And what this tacit or hidden knowledge enables us to do is to shift our mindset to see the world in a different way. And when we see the world in a different way, in a more useful way, then we can apply that thinking to solve very interesting and perhaps important problems. So design thinking is a tool for shifting our mindsets. It's a technique, and it's really at the core of a lot of things around innovation, because all of innovation is simply looking for knowledge that doesn't exist yet. You know, we try to create new knowledge because that enables us to solve certain types of problems that we're interested in. And by definition, we don't know the answer. It's reported that Einstein once said that we call it research, quote, we call it research because we don't know what we're doing, meaning we don't yet know the answer. So we have to research and discover. So design thinking is a structured technique or methodology for doing that. So I want to start with a bunch of examples. I've got a whole lot a whole lot of them to share with you. We'll go through them fairly quickly. So we'll start with the vehicle industry. You all are familiar with minivans. So there's an assumption that goes along with every product, every question, every innovation effort that you're involved with. And the question then becomes, is the assumption correct and how can we adjust it? So with respect to the creation of the minivan, so this was done by Chrysler Corporation in the 1980s. There was an assumption that automobiles, cars, vans belong in garages. But at that time, the vans that were available were large cargo vans, and they were converted into passenger vehicles, but they were too big to fit in the garage. So Chrysler created a mini version of the cargo van, and the result was about a $30 billion revenue for Chrysler over the course of a couple of decades. So here we have an example of design thinking achieving many, many billions of dollars of revenue for a company. At the time that they were creating the minivan, this is a quote from the leader of the team. His name was Hal Sperlich. He said, "No one wrote us a letter asking us to create a smaller version of the van. It wasn't a concept that people had. People didn't have the idea that a van could be smaller, so they weren't asking for it. So the Chrysler designers and engineers had to go and figure it out for themselves. And one of the things that they did to figure it out was simply by observing in the neighborhoods where they happened to live that there were lots of vans parked in the driveway, and they began to wonder, why are they in the driveway and not in the garage? And then they realized it was a size problem, and that led them to create the product. A diaper company, Kimberly-Clark, had an engineering assumption that a diaper is a disposable waste bandage. That was literally the language that Kimberly-Clark R&D were using to describe a diaper. And they hired a firm to do some design thinking about diapers because they were looking for new ways to create products. And they discovered that diaper has important aspects in child development and in parenting. And as a result, they created a new product, which is called the Pull-Up, and it's a $1 billion diaper. So creating a $1 billion diaper, a very significant consumer product for Kimberly-Clark, and it's completely changed the diaper industry. Is now multi-billion dollar product. And again, the key insight came about through a very formal process of design thinking. Another example, in drugstores. So a drugstore company that we were working with had an assumption that they needed to increase their inventory. And we did a design thinking exercise with them, and they discovered that the problem was not the inventory, it was the layout of the store. So what we did was we had them go into their own stores as if they had never been in there before, and they discovered how horribly the stores were designed. They were badly lit, they were not pleasant to be in. And so they redesigned the stores and increased their market share significantly. Another automobile example. So you may or may not recognize this car. It's a Toyota sold in the US under the Scion brand. And the advertising campaign for this car was a little bit unusual. The essence of the ad campaign was, "Do not buy this car." So have you ever seen a product advertised with the advertising slogan, "Don't buy the product"? Well, that was the advertising slogan for this product, in fact, for the entire brand, the entire Scion brand. But it was tremendously successful. It was successful because it responded to hidden or tacit knowledge of the particular market that they were targeting for this product. Now, the person who discovered this by doing ethnographic research, by doing design thinking, at the time he worked for Toyota, his name was Jim Farley. He was a very talented guy. He subsequently got hired by Ford, and now he's the CEO of Ford. And I happened to have the privilege of having a meeting with him when he was still at Toyota. And he told us the story of how they created this Scion and how they created this ad campaign called "Do Not Buy This Car." And now he's applying some of the same thinking at Ford. And so there's a photograph here of a new Ford product called the Ford Bronco. And they're using many of the same techniques from design thinking in the marketing of the Bronco. So again, automotive industry, multi-billion dollars involved. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, a craft business, house cleaning. So a small house cleaning company had made the assumption that they could increase their market share if they lowered their prices, but they decided to test the assumption by talking to their customers. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, this comes from a book called Design a Better Business, which is a very fine book and has lots of design thinking examples in it. So what the house cleaners discovered was that many of their customers were elderly and they were lonely and isolated. And what was more important to them than the price was the fact that the maid was a companion for them. And so the maids rearranged their work plan. And after cleaning the house, they would sit down with their customers over a cup of coffee. Sometimes they would bring them flowers or cookies. So they were able to keep their prices unchanged, but increase their market share and increase the referrals that they were getting because they were responding to an unspoken need of their customers, which was, simply someone to have a cup of coffee with and visit with once in a while. We did an interesting project for the World Economic Forum on cancer care and breast cancer in particular. And the assumption going into the project was that the critical factor was the care, the technical medical care that the patients received. But the project revealed that there was a tremendous psychological problem associated with this, of course, which we naturally understand. But that changed the way they started to deliver care by providing advice, counseling, and psychological help to help women and their families handle the stress in their lives. So it turned out that that was just as important as the quality of the medical care that they were receiving. Another case study from Haier, which is a Chinese company that manufactures consumer goods. This was a project done by a partner firm of ours in Shanghai called Meerkat. They worked with Haier and they discovered that the needs for a particular class of product in Chinese residential industry was water heaters. So as you know, the Chinese apartment building industry has been suffering lately, but for about 15 or 20 years, it was a booming business. And Haier wanted to penetrate the business with a high-end brand, a high-end hot water heater. So they successfully created a new product. And the important thing about this is the bottom line, number 5 there. The value proposition of the product had absolutely nothing to do with heating water. It turned out that customers were very interested in the purity of the water and the healthfulness of the water. And they just assumed that the water would be heated. So as you can see here, they sold $7.5 million of products in the first 3 months based on a very, very different value proposition that they discovered by doing design thinking. And here's a project we did last week with Optum, which is a big healthcare company in the US. You can see that they're a group of people and they're in a workshop setting. And you can see those cardboard cutouts. We call those personas. We create personas as a way to discover sort of the critical behavioral qualities and the needs of people. So we ran a workshop to think about how Optum, which is a healthcare company, can provide better healthcare in the future. So these examples are all intended to illustrate something really important about design thinking, which is that the insights that arise from design thinking will enable organizations, as I said, both in the public and private sectors, to make major decisions and to make better quality of decisions. And why is that? Well, because they have better quality of information. So the benefits of design thinking are pretty clear, making better decisions, obviously, but also, as I said at the beginning, seeing what others do not see. Innovation is all about discovering something new, and design thinking is a technique for doing that. So we can meet hidden customer needs, which enables us to delight the customer. We can find new markets, and we can make our investments in innovation pay off very, very nicely. As you can see, many multi-billion-dollar results from these case studies and many, many other case studies that have achieved significant results as well. So the way we do design thinking and the way we teach design thinking is according to a framework. So it's not just a matter of, Post-its and wild brainstorming. It's actually quite structured. And I want to walk you through now what we see as the structure that we follow. Now, I should mention that there are a lot of different approaches to design thinking. They have many, many features in common. The particular one that we're using is a derivative of the process which was created at Stanford University. So design thinking was created by a consulting firm called IDEO, a product design firm based in Silicon Valley. They developed a very strong relationship with Stanford University, and Stanford created a new graduate program called the D School, D for design, of course. And so the D School is sort of the home of design thinking, and a lot of great work has been done there. So we partnered with Stanford and we partnered with some of their professors, and we began to learn the technique and then to be able to teach it ourselves after we had created, after we completed a lot of successful projects. So we think about it in 3 stages, and each stage has 2 parts to it. So as you can see here, the first stage is immerse. So we describe that as engaging in the environment to capture information. So the first thing we want to do is to understand what's going on with our customers, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, again, to expose the hidden or tacit knowledge. And we're going to create a lot of observations, and we won't necessarily understand what we're seeing until we go back and then try to map it. So understanding means to immerse ourselves in the environment, to go and see where our customers live, where they work, what they're trying to accomplish, what the barriers are that are inhibiting them, et cetera. And we create lots of observations, and then we try to understand the patterns behind those observations. So that's the immerse stage. And then comes the invention stage, which is the part of innovation that we're all familiar with. The ideation, the post-its, the lots of ideas, the crazy ideas of brainstorming. So here what we're doing is we're actually, first of all, defining the problem, and then we're creating potential solutions. And this is a really important distinction that as innovators, you're probably familiar with, but non-innovators are very often unaware of, which is that the process of innovation means we actually create the problem that we want to solve. We define the problem. The problem is not given. And very often the client will tell us what they think the problem is. And very often in this sort of process, we'll discover that the actual problem is different than what we expected. And that's why those case studies that I presented earlier start with an assumption, and then they lead to a discovery, because the assumption is very often incorrect. And the purpose of design thinking in this situation is to discover what actually the problem is, and then to enable us to ideate around the true problem as opposed to the imagined problem. So once we ideate, then what do we have to do? Well, we have to implement it, which means we have to prototype and test our ideas and see if they actually work. So it's a very simple process, as you can see. And again, the purpose is simply to enable us to shift our thinking. So this is a tool or a framework or a methodology to begin to see the world differently and to understand how we can meet customer needs differently than perhaps we thought of before. So it's a shift of our perspective, it's a shift of our awareness, it's a shift of our perception. All of those shifts enable us to discover new things. So here are some examples from industry that obviously you're familiar with. So when the iPhone came out in 2007, all of the Nokia phones that were available, so at that time, Nokia was the world leader in cell phones. They had more than 70% global market share. The iPhone came out and it did not have the one thing that all the Nokia phones had, which was a keyboard. And the industry, the phone industry, couldn't grasp the fact that this device didn't have a keyboard, and it was heavily criticized for it. Many industry experts, quote unquote, thought that the iPhone would fail because it didn't have a keyboard. And of course, that's one of its defining features and one of the reasons why it's so successful. So a complete shift of mind. The taxi industry was protected, they thought, and they could deliver very lousy service and at a very expensive price until Uber came along and shifted our perspective about what it means to take that form of transportation. So a complete mind shift and a completely different business model. So biomimicry is a field that also helps us to shift our thinking. So we apply sometimes biomimicry in design thinking project. So bio meaning biology, meaning life, mimicry meaning to copy. So the example that I'm showing here is the upper left-hand corner is the old style of aircraft wing, which was flat. And then as around the 1990s, the aircraft companies began to put these little winglets on the end of the wings. And the inspiration for doing that came from birds. They noticed that birds had winglets, and they began to wonder why. And they discovered that winglets make flying more efficient for birds and more efficient for airplanes. Another example of biomimicry, the front of the bullet trains is a direct copy, an intentional copy of a kingfisher bird, which is a bird that flies over the water and then dives into the water, and it's aerodynamically and hydrodynamically very, very efficient. So we can take inspiration from many, many sources. If you're not familiar with biomimicry, I highly recommend it. It's a fascinating field of study. There's a great book on that topic, and there's a set of very, very interesting websites. And later on, I'll come back to this because we also have a section on biomimicry in the design thinking course that we can now offer you through GIMI. So going back to the framework, I presented it before as, 3 images: immerse, invent, and implement. And here you can see it in a more dynamic fashion because it's an iterative cycle. So we immerse ourselves, we understand what's going on with customers, we map that, we define the problem, we ideate around the problem, we prototype and test. And then what do we do after we test? Well, we start the same cycle again because we know that going through multiple iterations of the design thinking process will lead us to very, very strong results. It's almost never the case that the first prototype is perfect. We always will discover ways to improve it. So this cycle is just reminding us that it's not a linear process. It's a constantly looping cyclical process. And we gradually hone in through 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 iterations on a product or a service which is truly going to transform the marketplace. Now, this is a bit of a challenge for traditional business, because in traditional business, we want to go faster. We want to do it simply. And so we focus a little bit on mapping the environment, and then we have a big emphasis on ideation and even a bigger emphasis on implementation. So this is what happens when we shortcut the design thinking process, when we try to go too fast, when we don't do our homework, so to speak, and we end up with very, very unsatisfying results. So you've probably seen the statistics on the failure of innovation. I've seen anywhere from 60% to 95% of innovation projects fail, depending on the industry. And the reason that most of them fail is because they have not been rigorous in understanding the customer needs. So they've created products or services that people don't want or don't need because they didn't go to the trouble to understand what the actual needs are, what the hidden and tacit needs are. So design thinking as a rigorous process enables us to avoid short-circuiting and enables us to achieve outstanding results. But to get something great, you have to be willing to invest the time necessary to do that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of highlight now on each of the 3 categories. So immersion techniques. So this is where our research on innovation comes in. We began to capture a list, and we discovered that we could identify 48 different techniques for researching. And we then grouped them into these 4 categories. So there are techniques for immersion, sometimes called ethnographic research, techniques for observation, techniques for interacting, and many topics to consider when you're in the immerse phase of design thinking. I mentioned mapping. So here's how we think about mapping. Again, it's not that I expect you to grasp the complexity of an image like this, but to recognize that there is a very specific framework that you can learn, that you can apply. So what we're looking at on the left side is that we can understand by exploring tacit needs, by looking at the competitive landscape, by looking at the technology landscape, and we can begin to map those needs onto factors like what are the customer's pain points, what are the problems they're experiencing, what are the trends which are driving the industry, and what opportunities we might be able to find. In the invent phase, we've discovered 6 very different ways to invent, and this led us to a detailed list of 52 different sources of ideas, which is written in one of our books called Permanent Innovation. In the implement phase, it's all about prototyping. So we can make a distinction between a low fidelity prototype. Here you see some engineers designing on a whiteboard. And here's a higher fidelity prototype. This is not working code. This is sample code, but we can begin to design and test interfaces this way. So we work through progressive refinements in our prototyping. We start with things very simple, often on whiteboards or made out of cardboard, and gradually the prototypes become more highly developed. Now, what I'm trying to show here is the relationship between the traditional funnel concept of innovation management and how does it relate to design thinking. So we've organized the funnel, which, as you know, is often thought of as a stage gate process. We've organized the funnel into the very early stages, which we might call learning and discovery research, and then the middle phases where we've identified specific targets or problems that we want to solve, and we're doing targeted research, and then the development phase. So you can see low fidelity prototyping at the proof of concept stage, high fidelity prototyping at the prototype stage, and then we move into pilot. And then obviously, as you go to the right, you release the successful products that have aced it through this process and really demonstrate that they have great value to add to customers. So what we see here is that actually we can go through the design thinking process in two different ways, in sort of two different levels of detail. So learning and discovery design thinking process would have a certain character to it, very open-ended. Targeted research would have a much more focused process, but again, applying the same principles of design thinking. So what this enables us to do is to map design thinking onto the funnel and onto the stage gate, and to create a very coherent framework for how we're going to pursue innovation. Now, this is not particularly relevant for small companies, but this is very relevant for large organizations because large companies have big budgets and they have traditionally a more formal approval process for innovations. And so they need to have this kind of structure. If I'm working with a smaller company, I simplify this down enormously. We still go and do immersion research. We still do invention, but we can do the whole thing in a week, whereas in a large organization, it might take a couple of months to work through these cycles. But the same core processes apply. It's just a matter of how the process plays out and how many people are involved and the level of complexity of the products themselves. Another thing we think about when we're doing design thinking is what's on the edge and what's in the core. So we see this, the bell curve. So the bell curve is demonstrating the structure of the market. We have a core market. And what we discover is that we find new ideas on the edge. We look for new ideas on the edge, but then we test them at the core. And that was essentially what was behind the insight that was behind the Scion advertisement that I mentioned earlier, "Do not buy this car." So Jim Farley and his team at Scion discovered some ideas on the edge of the automotive marketplace, and they were able to bring them to the core of the marketplace and create a tremendous success with Scion. Those of you who know the American market may know that Scion eventually was shut down. It eventually failed, but it had a very illustrative start, a very, very successful start when Jim Farley was there. When I met him, he was at Toyota, and I was in a meeting with him with one of my clients, and he spent a couple hours talking us through the whole process. And I started taking notes at the beginning of the meeting, and by the end of the meeting, I had about 10 pages of notes because I was writing furiously as he was telling us all this stuff. And a couple of weeks later, I realized that he had told us so much that was really interesting. I wanted to write an article about it. And I called back to the Toyota office and I said, I just had a meeting with Mr. Farley, and he told us so much great stuff. I'd like your permission to write an article and publish it. And they said, well, you can't do that. And they were very gruff with me. And I was quite surprised because they'd been very friendly before. And I said, why not? And they said, well, because he doesn't work here anymore, because he just got recruited to Ford. So Ford recruited him into a very high level position. And after about 4 years, they named him CEO because he really is a quite brilliant guy. So now I follow Ford very closely because I'm interested to see how he's going to bring design thinking and other innovation techniques to the company. And so far, it seems to be going quite well. So again, core and edge model is a useful tool for design thinking. Another one is the value ladder model, which basically says that we can create tiers in a marketplace. And it can help us understand how to create unique selling propositions. So the example here is in relation to pull-ups, which is the Kimberly-Clark diaper story, the billion-dollar diaper. What pull-ups did was essentially took an average value proposition and made it into a differentiated proposition. So very interesting case study. Now, Arila mentioned the design thinking course. So we've now taken about 25 or 30 videos that we had created for our Innovation Mastery course and made them available through the GIMI Institute. So there's a level 1 course and a level 2 course, and you can sign up for them and get a certificate. So the level 1 course is, you can see on the left, those are the topics, and the level 2 on the right. The ones I've highlighted in red are the case studies. Obviously, there's some principles that you have to learn, which you'll get in a little bit more detail than I'm able to cover here. But we all learn best from stories, and so we put as much emphasis on stories as we could. Now, Rila also mentioned some of our books, so I just wanted to show you an image of that. So this is our current version of our innovation library. And here are some books which we specifically talk about design thinking. So the Innovation Master Plan is our overall framework approach. The Innovation Formula is a book designed for innovation in small business. The Brand Bridge is obviously about branding. And then at the bottom, we have 6 workbooks, and one of them is focused on design thinking. So the workbook is a companion to the online course. Now, Arila has mentioned that some of the GIMI partner organizations around the world may be interested in applying this with their customers, with their clients. And so if you're interested in a train-the-trainer program, then we'd be very happy to provide one. We just need to get your feedback on that. So just to summarize, why do we do design thinking? Because it enables us to see differently. It's all about what we can see, because if we can see differently, if we can see what others have not seen, if we can see new ways to meet customer needs, to meet their requirements, and to meet requirements that they don't even know that they have, then we can very often create successful innovations. So a recap of the benefits slide. Why do we do design thinking? Because it enables us to make better decisions. It enables us to see what others don't see, to meet hidden customer needs, find new markets, and make our innovation investments pay off. So there you go. That's design thinking. And as I mentioned, the Innovation Mastery course, the full course is 125 videos, about 25 hours of content. And you can also access that through the GIMI system. So that's available through other linkages in the GIMI Learning Academy.
Thank you very much, Langdon. I just shared the link of the store for Anna, which was okay. Thank you, Anna. So thank you very much for the whole talk.
If I may say, something. Just a couple of seconds. First and foremost, for everybody who's listening to Langdon, Langdon has been in the space of innovation for more than 25, 30 years, if not longer. I may even underestimate the time. I met him about 23 years ago when he had published his book, 4th Generation R&D. And I was at After the Little, and met him at that time. This were the new books which are coming out in terms of what is innovation, what do we do next. And we're still talking about R&D back in those old days. And many of the techniques of innovations are coming out of R&D management. And those tools have gone forward. But then there were other tools that came out from design thinking, which are kind of integrated in R&D, but very different. And so I just want to make sure everybody who's listening in, first, design thinking is a very powerful tool. And as he wrote the word see differently, as I was looking at it, I don't know if it was intentional, Langdon, I saw serendipity. And I saw the word serendipity in there, in the see differently, how it was laid out. And the thing was, innovation used to be almost serendipity is how it was treated before. And design thinking is a method by way you can actually see things differently. And therefore, what we would call intuition and luck and all that stuff that some people get, he's taken it to a science and a methodology. So I really encourage everybody to see that. Langdon's a global expert. The topic is critical in our space of innovation. And I cannot support Langdon even more, any of the courses is teaching, and the story is inside there. The best way to teach and learn is through storytelling. So Langdon, thanks for the presentation. I just want to invite you into our community and everybody in the GIMI think tank. Go do a course. Go do a course as soon as possible.
Thank you,
Langdon.
Ted. Thank you very much.
If I could just add, this is Ron Jonash. If I could just add on to Hitendra's comments, design thinking is certainly kind of a central mantra and way of thinking today. And my appeal to everybody, I mean, it was when I went to college eons ago. I graduated in 1968, 1970, and we were all the rage then was design thinking. It's finally taken hold. And I think now my challenge to all of us is to incorporate design thinking and think beyond. Think what if, think what's next. Think about storytelling, about reinventing the future. And using digital tools. So there's a whole bunch of tools and methods out there that complement design thinking very well and take it to the next generation so that we can really embrace gamification, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, all the things that are currently the rage out there that people are trying to figure out how to incorporate into what we're doing. It's not replacing design thinking. It's not replacing systems analysis. It's just, and systems thinking, it's things that add on to the power, the essential power of design thinking. So I just want to thank Langdon again and appeal to everybody to push the frontiers further. What if, what's next, what else?
Very nice. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. I see here basically in the chat few questions. So one is from Vince. Vince, do you want me to read or do you want to speak up?
Oh, I'm in a public place. Please go ahead, Darila.
Okay. Yes. So Visto Bias is from Ayala, basically group in Philippines, one of the biggest companies there. He's asking, what is more effective in designing solutions for customers, design thinking or the jobs to be done approach?
Do I get to answer or someone else?
Yes, I believe it's for you.
You're center stage.
That was for Langdon.
Okay, great. Well, I would consider jobs to be done to be just a variation on design thinking. Basically, jobs to be done is a way to go and interact with customers and find out the hidden factors involved. Jobs to be done, as you know, came from Clayton Christensen and his work. And if you haven't seen it, there's a fabulous video that he recorded that's now on YouTube, which describes why McDonald's milkshake is a great thing to have for breakfast. It's really funny, but it talks about jobs to be done in a very, very interesting way. And so basically, the underlying story of that is that McDonald's was very interested to know and curious to know why people were buying milkshakes in the morning, because they were thinking of it as a dessert that you would have after dinner or in the middle of the day. And so someone on Clayton Christensen's staff went to McDonald's and talked to people who were buying milkshakes in the morning and discovered from those interactions why the product was so successful in the morning, why the sales were so high in the morning. So basically, they were doing design thinking, they were doing ethnographic research by going to the McDonald's stores and talking to customers, which is the immerse phase. And then they applied that thinking to understand sort of what was behind it. I don't think it necessarily changed how McDonald's was marketing the product. It didn't change the composition of the product, but it changed their understanding of customers in a possibly significant way. So again, Vince, to summarize, I would say that they're basically just two flavors of a similar thing. Design thinking is probably more comprehensive, but jobs to be done would fit very well into the immerse phase and possibly the invent phase of a design thinking approach.
And I would encourage everybody to think about what Hitendra and I have been trying to write a book about for the last 5 or 6 years, called The Powers of And. It's not or, it's not which of these is better. It's how do you combine all these proven approaches into something that works for you, the context you're working in, the ecosystem you're working in, the technologies you're working in. And in each case, it'll be something different. So it is really risky. You can see many companies who have embraced one method and have failed because that method may work for one situation, it doesn't work for another, and it doesn't encourage diversity of thought because you're in a rules-based system. And rules-based systems and approaches are good, but it's when you combine them and you have multiple dots that you can connect in different ways, that's when you get real wows and ahas. So again, I always get nervous when somebody says, which is better, when in fact they are both important ingredients.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Thank you, Ron. Do we have any other questions, comments?
Hi, it's Brett here.
Yes.
Hey, Brett.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. Hello, Langdon, one of my good friends. It's good to see you on here.
Santa Fe, I like your background, Brett.
Isn't that nice? I have to tell you, I've been utilizing, as a trainer kind of approach. Langdon's got some really great support material, and I got to tell you, of all the training I do, the design thinking stuff that Langdon has imparted on me, the thinking is really the most fun. It's really a blast. I tend to focus more on the company and how to get more people involved, but the people who are involved, Langdon's done a great job with it. His workbooks are first class. I put it in the comments. So I am glad to see you here, Langdon. I'm glad we've been able to pull you over from IOIP to the new GIMI IOIP, and so welcome. I look forward to seeing a lot from you.
Thanks, Brett. Very nice of you to mention that.
Great. In the meantime, that maybe others are thinking about the next question. Okay, I see Tom Brazil as well commenting here. Tom, do you want to speak up or?
Yeah, just real quickly. So I've known Langdon since about 2016, 2017 timeframe. And I had the pleasure of working with him several different times. I encourage anyone to look into his books, take his courses. It's just fantastic material. He's such a great storyteller.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Great. We are really happy to have Langdon right now, part of our network. Langdon, in the meantime, I see that we... Yes, Ron?
And
please.
learn how to tell stories as well as Langdon does. Storytelling is an amazing asset. It can be a learned skill. But I think people who can create stories, tell stories, show stories are the people who are able to convince people to get on board with what they're doing. So I encourage you to see his kind of storytelling prowess at work also in his courses and in his books.
Great. Thank you, Ron. I see Solomon has a question. Solomon?
Yeah, it's not a question though, but something that I'm asking. For example, the books, his books, we from the African part, we are looking at when we buy from maybe Amazon, the shipping cost alone. Is it a possible way that probably he has a plans to have maybe a co-publisher that can print and maybe sell in maybe Ghana or West Africa so that the shipping costs will reduce the distance? Is it any plans for that? I was trying to buy the Global Science, the volume 1, but the shipping costs alone. So then that is why I'm asking that whether there is such opportunity, especially we from the African side.
Well, I can respond with respect to my books. We own the copyrights to them, and we can certainly make a publishing arrangement for West Africa. If you have the ability to have the books printed and distributed there, we can certainly provide them to you for that. I understand that. I get that question all the time. It's really a problem. We think we're globalized, but we're not as globalized as we should be with respect to knowledge. So, Solomon, feel free to reach out to me, and we can work on that separately.
Okay, thank you. Then I will get your email address from Erena, and
Yep.
maybe you talk about it.
Yep, I'll put it in the chat as well right now.
Great. I see Anna commenting as well. Design thinking creates good storytelling. Is it right? Langdon's, I believe, is more like a validation of what you mentioned, Langdon. Actually, I have a question. In the meantime, Langdon, we see that sometimes in different companies, design thinking is embedded in, most probably in most of the cases, innovation teams, strategy teams. Sometimes there are cases in HR, or there are cases basically that the companies try to make that a responsibility of cross-functional teams, right? From your experience, what's the best practice from the companies you have consulted so far? So which is the best practice or the best company which embeds design thinking? Basically, which are the departments or the people who should be responsible for that?
That's a really interesting question. I can start by referencing how they handled it at Stanford. So I mentioned that Stanford created a new graduate program called the D School. The D School is not a degree granting program. So it's an unusual graduate program at Stanford in that it has none of its own students. The students in the D School come from all of the other graduate programs at the university. So they are lawyers, engineers, scientists, etc. And the reason for that is because at Stanford, they want the design thinking methodology and framework to be embedded in industry, not just for product development or for R&D, but really embedded in how people work across all industries. And so that demonstrates the idea that it has applicability no matter what your field is. So again, if you're a lawyer, if you're getting an MBA, if you're getting an engineering degree, the techniques and the way of thinking that are embedded in design thinking will be useful to you. And so I think to the point of your question, Arila, you should be able to apply these techniques anywhere in an organization. Now, classically, it belongs in R&D and product development in research because it is a perfect fit for most of the things that we're trying to do in a new product development environment, or in a new service development environment, or a new business model development environment. But it's applicable across the board. So from a consulting perspective, we've used these techniques in healthcare, we've used them in food products, we've used them with UNICEF in humanitarian work, all very, very different types of concerns. But the point again is that to solve the very complex business problems that we're facing today, we have to learn how to see the world differently. And design thinking is a technique that if we follow it rigorously, it will give us insights that we couldn't get probably any other way. So that relates to any kind of business problem that you're trying to solve across all aspects of all industries.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, Ron?
And just another quick footnote to that. In the 60s, we did something, we didn't call it the design school at Princeton, but we did the same thing. And we had people who were majors in engineering systems, in economics and finance, and behavioral economics, and architecture, all working together in a non-degree program. We were getting other degrees, but we were combining them. So we're actually getting multiple degrees. It never caught on like it did at the design school, but I think all of us know how important it is to have people who wear different shoes and different pairs of glasses participate in innovation initiatives, not only for designing the solution, but for designing the best pathway to execute that solution and scale it up. And so lawyers are important, accountants are important. We always think they're black hats and we don't want them on our team, but you have to get them on their team. They have to feel part of this. They have to be engaged. They have to see that this recognizes their importance in the whole ecosystem as well. So enabling people to understand and role play with other people's shoes and glasses is important, and design thinking enables that. It's kind of more of a universal language. But I think the most important thing is actually creating this in a way that they want to participate. I remember many, many, many cases where you'd nominate somebody from finance and they'd say, this isn't worth any of my time. I'll wait till it comes across my desk and then I'll kill it. And so, you've got to have that person and that point of view on the team and understand where they're coming from and how to get feedback, buy-in, whatever you want to call it, from them. And again, I think design thinking is just a great framework to make them feel important. If you don't respect them, If you don't make them feel important, they'll kill you in the end. They've got a lot of clout. You know, decisions, innovations aren't solely the province of RD&E. There are a lot of other people that have to weigh in, whether it's marketing and sales or client relationships or accounting, all of these things that are part of the system. And so understanding the system, managing the system, again, design thinking is just a very good framework for doing that. And I appeal to everybody to try to use it that way as a way to build broader based teams that can work together and use a common language. I think that's what we're all trying to do, whether we're using design thinking or other tools. And so maybe I'm kind of sounding like a broken record here, but I think it's really, really important.
Thank you very much, Ron, for your insights as well. So since we have the last minutes, Langdon, I'd like you to share what's the takeaway from today's session. So what's the insight overall for the design thinking? We use this usually as the opening statement for the insight report we'll build out of your speech. And of course, any call for action for the courses that right now are part of the GIMI platform.
Well, thank you, Arila. Again, thank you all for inviting me to spend some time with you. So I think Ron has actually said it very well in terms of sort of what is the value proposition or the importance of design thinking. If you're going to design things that are meaningful, then you're going to be introducing change into organizations. And organizations will steadfastly resist change unless the people in the organization understand why it's important. And so engaging the attorneys, engaging the accountants, engaging the engineers, the management people, as well as the innovators in marketing and product design, et cetera, is really important for being able to make change successfully in organizations. I mentioned that we did a project with UNICEF, and UNICEF, as important as the work that they do is also somewhat bureaucratic, as you can imagine, an organization consisting of 193 different countries. And yet we were able to bring some significant change because it was a participatory process and people learned and understood what was happening. So also, as Ron said, it's not all of innovation. Design thinking is a tool or technique to have within your toolkit, within your portfolio. It's not the whole picture. There's many other important aspects of innovation management that are critical, but it is a very powerful tool, and it can lead to some really amazing discoveries, as I tried to show with the examples I shared at the beginning. Multi-billions of dollars of revenue has been created from insights from design thinking. I want to close by mentioning, again, the course, which we've been talking about, which is on the GIMI platform. And again, if you're a GIMI partner and you're interested in a Train the Trainer program, then please contact Arila. If we can get enough of the partners interested, then we can offer it. So we can offer a more interactive and in-depth program than would be available through the online program. So how does that sound, Arila?
Yes, that's great. So we will have another session, I believe, as a training of trainers for all our partners. I'll get some slots from you, Langdon, and let's basically arrange, at least within the year, one training of trainers. I believe many of them are interested either to train or to basically sell this program in their own countries. So that's great. Thank you very much, Langdon, for all the insights, for the discussion. I got some emails that need more information about the courses. I'll basically send an email and follow up with all of you. Of course, Vince, to anyone, will send basically to anyone today in the GIMI think tank, will send a follow-up basically with the course and everything. See you next week. We don't have a GIMI think tank actually, because we will be, all of us, most of us in particular, will be in Manila for the event that Vince in particular is hosting with Ayala, and many, Brett, I believe, Hitendra, and many others will be there. But we'll see each other at last week of November with a very interesting speaker on green hydrogen. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Great session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.